Chapter 1 Another World. You are listening at FameTV.com. Chapter 1 Another world. Room full of white. No matter where he looked, he could only see white walls, but that wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was that he couldn't move or do anything. It felt like floating was the only thing he could do. Patiently waiting in tranquil place, he suddenly felt something entering his body. Then, after a while, another mysterious power awakened deep inside his body. This time he clearly understood what it was as he remembered her words. Two different yet the same powers were currently running through his body slowly, as if they were getting familiar with every part of his body. And so, the young man spent his time boringly, but patiently. Soon, his vision blurred, and as he got control over his body, he couldn't help but close his eyes due to that sudden event. After a while, he opened his eyes once again and found himself in strange forest. The trees were multicolored and so its leaves. Sun poured its sunshine at him through gaps between leaves, which made him a little annoyed. But soon, that annoyance disappeared completely as though it never existed. The reason was obvious. Young man finally felt like a live person, like human being. He slowly stood up and looked around. Why didn't it teleported me to some kind of city? He grumbled to himself while moving in random direction. Looking at unfamiliar environment, he couldn't help but reminisce about Earth and its catastrophe. Earth, 2050, ding. 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 Annoying sound of alarm clock resounded through the room. Young man who was sleeping peacefully, woke up angrily once more, shouted, "I said 5 minutes more." And glanced at clock with one of his eyes that clearly showed time. Realizing that he overslept by 2 hours, he woke up fully and sighed to himself. And I just promised for class president that I will behave and attend to school properly. Well, whatever. Me, going to school regularly for whole month already is big progress. He had quickly made excuse for tomorrow as he stood up from bed vigorously. Free days are always the best. So much time, so much to do. Boom. As if answering to his words, enormous earthquake reverberated. But, at the same time, his heart started beating furiously. It was the first time he had ever felt that way. Falling on knees, he grasped his chest as his breathing became irregular. Looking at the floor with watery eyes and body full of sweat, he thought to himself, is that how am I going to die? I, Schwerin, will die in such a lame way. Earthquakes, that were way too louder than usual earthquake, had lasted for 10 minutes just like Schwerin's symptoms. Immediately after they had stopped, Schwerin felt indescribable happiness. He felt way better than he had ever felt. Like his body got stronger and mind more clear. His morning headache had already disappeared, but because everything happened during earthquakes, he swore loudly. Fucking earthquakes! If I had to choose between headache or heart attack, of course I would choose headache. God *knit. With angry steps, he went to look over window. He knew that because of that earthquake at least half of his house stuff fell all over place. The moment he had got to the window, he immediately became dumbstruck. Black hole. Yes, in the sky enormous black hole had appeared. Soon, black dots had left the hole and scattered all over the sky. Of course Schwerin, who was normal human, had no way to know that those were all living beings. Because of fear, he looked down and noticed his neighbor. With shaking voice he asked. Mr. Yen. Aren't you scared? What the hell is this? Don't tell me that you don't. Before he could talk longer, the angry look of his neighbor made him stop talking. Stupid brat, why are you crying over such thing? It was just a bit louder than normal earthquake, stupid brat. Why aren't you in school anyway, huh? Getting such response made Schwerin flabbergasted. This old man can't see such a big hole in sky. There is no way he is faking this, so. Why can I see it? What is going on? Of course, there was no one who could hear his thoughts or even answer them. 1 hour later, Schwerin was sitting on his bed rather not comfortably. His body was shaking way too much and his mind was in turmoil. Ever since he had noticed black hole, his eyes never left it as he was looking at it with conflicted expression. And because of that, he realized true identity of black dots. Monsters. Sometimes he saw beasts, sometimes he saw monsters, sometimes even humans. But humans who could fly throughout the sky, were they really humans? What do they want from Earth? With such thoughts he was waiting for something to happen. Of course, he tried to think positively, that maybe they had come here with peaceful intentions, and such a thoughts lingered in his mind. Another hour passed and finally, something happened. Schwerin had heard multiple screams and so he screamed within himself a sheet. 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 Don't tell me they attacked. He rushed once more to his window only to see his neighbor being eaten alive by some kind of wolf. On top of that wolf sat proudly little green creature, and Schwerin, who was rather knowledgeable about fantasy, muttered to himself, G.Goblin. It held sword in its small hand and soon used it to pierce heart of old man, which stopped his screams. Looking at the dead body of human, its smile grew even wider, but to young man it looked even more grotesque. Schwerin, who was looking at the scene from afar, surprisingly wasn't that scared. He, of course, had imagined such situation on his bed. Thinking that he might puke or faint, he had been scared, but now seeing it with his own eyes, he strangely got used to it. He had confidence out of nowhere which made him perplexed. After looking around, he knew that army of wolves and goblins have attacked humanity. The sight of blood made something deep in his body to beat violently. He, immediately had become scared once more and placed his hand on his chest which to his surprise, was beating regularly. What is this? Soul. He guessed quietly as his eyes were watching every bloodstain on humans unconsciously. But, the worst thing that Schwerin feared the most had yet to come. Earth had been attacked by monsters. All over place various monsters were attacking humans incessantly. But monsters appearing out of nowhere wasn't the only thing that happened to humanity. Heroes were born, or that's how everyone called them. They were people that during earthquake became stronger. Such thing happened to class president of Schwerin's class. If he didn't overslept, he would be just like her, standing in front of the students and holding barricade that had been made with tables and other various school stuff. The only difference between them was that she didn't get heart attack or anything like that. She just became stronger as if something had awakened inside her. Looking heroically, Yen Yuri stood bravely in face of disaster. If she knew that her old man had just died, would she be able to keep it up? Of course she was worrying about her home, but there was also another person. Her neighbor and a classmate who was both annoying and lazy. Just thinking about him made her more worried and annoyed, and such feeling gave her another boost of power as she strongly threw a pair of scissors at the monsters. On the other side, the person that lingered on young lady's mind was currently running through the streets somewhat leisurely. Ferocious wolves couldn't catch up to him and he himself didn't get really tired. Ever since that earthquakes, something definitely changed within me. When he first rushed out of his house, he jumped down from the first floor. Back then, he thought that jumping down will not only make him injured, but also lead him to death. He hadn't had expected otherwise. However, deep inside he was worried about his parents and friends. He imagined a lot of different scenarios, only to make himself even more worried. He hoped that they also became stronger just like him as he ran towards his school. But, soon he changed his destination, only because of the army that had gathered to chase him. When he ran, whether he wanted or not, he got all the attention of surrounding wolves and goblins. They had stopped eating and attacking their victims and chased after him. It was as if he was the most delicious human. Humans who saw that looked at him with most grateful expressions as they quietly muttered, "Hero." But Schwerin didn't care about that, his only focus was on monsters whose numbers gradually were growing. He knew that sooner or later, he will be surrounded by them and so, he tried to take detours to lose even a bit of them. Nevertheless, his efforts ended in vain as he got even more monsters on his tail. And after 30 minutes, Schwerin has been completely surrounded by obnoxious monsters. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.com, direct link in the description.